Once upon a time, not twice upon a time, not 3 times upon a time, but just once upon a time, there was a kingdom. The thrice 9th kingdom, far beyond the blue sea and the red sky. And in that kingdom, there was a king. Whether he was a good king or a bad king, I cannot tell you. You will have to decide for yourself. The king had a huntsman. And the huntsman had a horse. A valiant horse, and his companion over many, many years. Together, huntsman and horse and huntsman would go travelling through the kingdom, through forests and woods, over hills and mountains. And they would bring back treasures and meats and furs for the king. One day, as they were riding through a deep, dark forest with thick pine trees, the huntsman saw something. He saw something glittering. He saw something gold and red and fiery. He saw a feather, the feather of a firebird. Now the firebird is a rare and mystical bird. Very few have ever seen even a feather, and even fewer could claim to have seen it. The huntsman saw the feather and he thought of all the riches, the gold and silver, the rubies and emeralds that the king would give him if he brought it to him. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you," said his horse. "There'll be trouble if you do." But the huntsman's head was full of gold and emerald and jewels and sapphires and rubies. He took the feather and rode straightway back to the palace. When the king saw what the huntsman had brought, his eyes grew as big as saucers. "This is a rich gift indeed," said the king. "This is a truly amazing present. The feather of a firebird." The king thought for a moment. "If you are so clever that you can get me the feather of a firebird, then surely you are clever enough to find me the firebird itself." Before the hunter could protest or say a word, the king added, "If you fail, by my sword, your head will fall." Without daring to turn his back on his master, the huntsman left the palace, bitter tears forming in his eyes. He went straightway outside to meet his valiant steed, his horse, his companion, over many, many years. "Why are you weeping, master?" said his horse. "The king has ordered that I must find the firebird, and if I do not, I will die." "I told you there'd be trouble if you touched the feather," said the horse. "But weep not, fear not. This isn't trouble. The real trouble is yet to come." The horse told the huntsman to ask the king for a great bag of corn and a great field outside the palace and a great silver net. The king agreed instantly, and together, horse and rider travelled to a field outside the palace, a great empty field, and they planted the corn. And they hid, and they waited. They waited until the sun had set and the moon was high in the sky. They waited, and they waited, and they waited. They waited, and then from the sky came the bird, the Firebird, wreathed in flame, gold and orange, its fiery feathers falling and furling and whirling through the air. It landed in the field of corn and began to peck, 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 peck at the ground. Quietly. Slowly, the horse and the huntsman walked up to where the Firebird stood on the ground pecking the corn, and together they threw the net over the bird. The huntsman quickly bundled the bird onto the back of the horse, and together they rode straightway back to the palace. Now when the king saw this second gift, when the king saw the Firebird itself, his eyes grew as big as saucers. This is a wondrous gift indeed. The Firebird itself, said the king. The king thought. He looked at the feather. He looked at the Firebird. If you are so clever that you can get me the feather of a Firebird, if you are so clever that you can get me the Firebird itself, then surely you are clever enough to find me a wife. Princess Vasilisa, the most beautiful woman in all the world, lives far from the thrice-ninth kingdom, where the blue sea meets the red sky. Go and get her, and bring her back for my wife. And if you do not, by my sword, your head will fall. The huntsman, without daring to turn his back on his master, left the palace, bitter tears forming in his eyes. Straight away, he went outside to see his valiant horse, his companion over many, many, many years. Why are you crying, master? Said the horse. The king has ordered me to bring him Princess Vasilisa for his wife, and if I do not, I will die. I told you there'd be trouble if you picked up the Firebird's feather, said the horse. But weep not, fear not. This isn't trouble. The real trouble is yet to come. The horse told the huntsman to ask the king for fine wines, fine food, and a golden-topped tent. The king agreed immediately and gave them much more besides, pillows and silks and fine furs. The huntsman bundled it onto the back of the horse, and together they rode. They rode, they rode, and they rode, and they rode. They rode through the whole of the day. They rode for the whole of the night. They rode for the whole of the month. They rode for the whole of the year. They rode for a year. They rode for a year and a day until they reached a silvery shore with a big blue sea meeting the red sky. Silver waves lapped on the shore. The huntsman freed his horse to go and graze, and he set up the golden-topped tent. He filled it with the pillows and the silks and the furs, and carefully placed in the centre the fine wines and fine food. And he waited. Out on the ocean, far, far out, Princess Vasilisa was rowing her boat, watching the blue sea, watching the sea and the surf and the silver. In the distance, along the shore, she saw a golden-topped tent. And outside that golden-topped tent, she was sure she saw a little figure. A figure that seemed to be waving and calling her over. So she rowed. She rowed her boat through the waves and pulled it up onto the shore. There, the huntsman greeted her. "Princess Vasilisa, I bring you greetings from the thrice 9th kingdom. Come and sit and drink and eat with me." And so she did. The huntsman and Princess Vasilisa sat and drank, and talked and ate, and laughed and drank, and talked and laughed and drank some more. They drank so much, in fact, that Princess Vasilisa was soon in a deep, deep sleep. Quietly, the huntsman rolled Princess Vasilisa in a fur, in some silk. He packed up the golden-topped tent and took the sleeping princess to his horse. And together, horse and rider, rider and horse, rode as far and as fast as the horse's legs could carry them, with the sleeping princess back to the thrice 9th kingdom. When the king saw the beautiful Princess Vasilisa, his eyes grew as wide as saucers. Princess Vasilisa looked around her, slightly confused. She looked up at the king and looked around the strange palace. "My dear," said the king, "welcome to the thrice 9th kingdom. You will be my wife." Vasilisa looked at the king, a man much older than she was. She looked around at the strange palace and wondered where her little rowing boat was right now. "I will marry you, my lord," she said. "I will, but first I need my wedding dress. At the bottom of the sea, where the red sky meets the blue sea, on the ocean floor, there's a rock, and under that rock, my dress is hid. Get it for me, and I will marry you." The king thought for a moment, and then he turned to his huntsman. "If you are so clever that you can fetch me the feather of a firebird, if you are so clever that you can fetch me the firebird itself, if you, my dear huntsman, are so clever that you can bring me back the beautiful Vasilisa for my wife, then I know you can get her wedding dress." And before the huntsman could protest, "If you fail, by my sword, your head shall fall." Without daring to turn his back on his master, The huntsman left the palace, bitter tears forming in his eyes, and straightway went outside to see his horse, his friend, his valiant steed and companion for all these years. "Why are you weeping, master?" said the horse. "The king has ordered me to find Princess Vasilisa's wedding dress from the bottom of the ocean, and if I do not, I will die." "I told you there'd be trouble," said the horse. "But fear not, weep not. This is not trouble. The real trouble is yet to come. Come, ride on my back." And together they rode. They rode, they rode and they rode and they rode. They rode for the whole of the day. They rode for the whole of the night. They rode for the whole of the month. They rode for the whole of the year. They rode for a year. They rode for a year and a day until they once more reached the blue sea, where it meets the red sky. The horse and rider trotted along the beach until, in the distance, the horse spotted a crab, the king crab, with a golden shell and pink pincers. The horse walked up to the crab and softly and fairly gently put its hoof onto its shell. "Oh, please don't kill me, please don't kill me," cried the crab. "Give me life, don't let me die, I'll do anything you want." "At the bottom of the ocean," said the horse, "there's a rock, and under that rock, Princess Vasilisa's wedding dress is hid. Get it for me, and I will let you live." As far as a crab can nod, the crab nodded. He went to the edge of the sea and called in the language of the crabs across the ocean. The sea began to move and swell and undulate, and from the sea came hundreds and thousands of crabs. "Come, my friends," said the king crab, and together the crabs swam down, 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 down to the depths of the ocean. There they found the rock, and there they found the dress. And taking the shining wedding dress in their claws, they swam up, 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 until they were back at the ocean's surface, where the blue sea meets the red sky. The horse thanked the crab and took the wedding dress, and the huntsman thanked the horse. And together they bade farewell to the king of the crabs, and they rode and rode. They rode as far and as fast as the horse's legs would carry them until they were back in the thrice-ninth kingdom. When the king saw Vasilisa's shining wedding dress, his eyes grew as big as saucers. When Vasilisa saw the wedding dress, her eyes also grew large. "My dear, we can now be married." Vasilisa looked at the king and wondered where her little rowing boat was now. "I will marry you, my lord, but first I must ask a favour. Order a great cauldron be brought, a great cauldron of boiling water, and boil the huntsman. If you do that, I will marry you." The king thought for a moment. He thought of all the huntsman had brought him. He thought of the Firebird's feather, the Firebird itself, his beautiful bride-to-be, her wedding dress. And then he thought of Princess Vasilisa being his wife. And he ordered a great cauldron be brought. When the huntsman heard this, his eyes filled with tears. "Will you let me go and see my horse, my lord? Will you go and let me say goodbye?" The king agreed. So this was the trouble the horse had spoken of, thought the huntsman, and bitter tears formed in his eyes. "Why are you weeping, master?" said the horse. "I am to be boiled," said the huntsman. "There is no getting out of this one, my friend. This is the trouble you spoke of." "It is," said the horse. "Trouble has come, and you, my dear huntsman, will face your troubles with your head held high, for trouble will come, and trouble must be faced." The huntsman wiped the tears from his eyes. He stood straight up. He turned, bade goodbye to his horse, and walked straightway to the palace. If you had been there, you might have thought you'd seen the horse whisper some words under its breath. But maybe you were just dreaming. Back in the palace, a great cauldron had been brought full of steaming water. Without saying a word, the huntsman leapt. He leapt bravely and he dove straight into the steaming water. He ducked once, he ducked twice, and then nothing happened. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. For 2 heartbeats, nothing happened. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. And then, from out of the water, the huntsman emerged, more handsome and more beautiful than any storyteller could ever describe. The king looked at the huntsman, and Princess Vasilisa smiled at the huntsman. And the king saw Princess Vasilisa smiling at the huntsman, and the king looked at the huntsman and looked at the cauldron. And the king thought for a moment. Without saying a word, the king stepped from the throne. He stepped out of his clothes. And without saying a word to anyone, the king took a great flying leap into the air. He dived straight into the boiling water. He ducked once, he ducked twice, and then nothing happened. For 1 heartbeat, nothing happened. For 2 heartbeats, nothing happened. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. And the king was never seen again. In the absence of an heir, the brave, handsome, and very clever huntsman was proclaimed king. He married Vasilisa, and they ruled long and well together. And every year, they would pack the horse with a golden-top tent. And together, horse, huntsman and princess would ride. They'd ride, they'd ride, and they'd ride, and they'd ride. They'd ride for the whole of the day, the whole of the month. They'd ride for the whole of the month, the whole of the year. They'd ride for a year, they'd ride for a year and a day. Until they were back on the silvery shore, where the blue sea meets the red sky. They'd put up their golden top tent, they'd let their horse graze, and they would talk and laugh and eat and drink and laugh and talk, happily ever after.